Wow, I like that
What's
little
up,
introduction.
dude? Oh, thank you. Yeah, I changed it up because for the longest time I was doing the show at like 3:30 in the afternoon, my time, and that was
Right,
actually
right.
doing really well. But then my work schedule changed to where I worked at night. So I worked like from 1:30 to 11 at night. So then it was like all screwed up. So like for like a good month and a half, I barely even streamed, right? Because I was like, I couldn't figure out when the right time was. And now I've been doing it at about like 10:30 in the morning on Monday. So basically, I kept the Monday show, but now it's more of a morning thing that I do, and it takes a little while for an audience to kind of
To
realize,
adjust.
yeah, they're
No,
like, oh shit, now you're in the morning, what the hell? And so
well, what about if you drop your whole podcast and start talking about UFOs instead? Think think of
maybe I should. I was going to ask you about this. So Ty, it's been a while since you've been on here, and you damn near changed your entire channel. And
yeah.
so I wanted to ask you about that before we get started. Was what brought that on for you to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to change my entire channel to a different genre for that matter, different topic.
Yeah.
What kind of brought that on?
I think that's the question I get asked the most, not just from peers and colleagues that I used to have, but from my family. Like my family,
Right.
like they because when you start talking about something like UFOs, people automatically assume that you've either A, gone crazy, you've B, lost your mind, or C,
Right.
a combination of drugs and alcohol and whatever else. And it's not even that I like talking about UFOs more than I like talking about pop culture. It's that I lost my passion for pop culture. The show was just, I don't know. It was just I felt I was in a sea of competition that was doing the exact same thing that I was doing.
Oh, yeah.
and I was doing the exact same thing that this person and it was just I didn't know if I was going to be able to honestly I didn't know if I was going to be able to be anything special or anything out of the ordinary, and I was losing my passion and I was starting to hate people, like hate. And I just didn't want to be like that. And Justice had left the show by then. And the show had changed so much from what it began from that I just was like, you know what? I need to take a break. And then my mom passed away and
Right.
a lot of stuff happened. And I've always loved UFOs, man. I've always had a passion for this subject and I've always taken it super seriously. So I was like, what can I do that's my own? And all of a sudden, I started speaking to people like Kevin Day of the USS Nimitz. Now, anyone familiar with the UFO topic will know the the Navy footage that's always
Yes.
with anything. It's always anything UFO story. You always see the same video. Now that video comes, or at least one of the three, comes from the USS Princeton, or I guess the Nimitz battle group. And in 2004, they had an encounter with what is called the Tic Tac. I'm actually friends with the guy who was watching the radar for 5 days before they vectored a flight to go check what it was that was dropping from
Right.
80,000 feet to sea level in about a fraction of a second, which
Right.
is, I mean, it just, it breaks every law of physics that we, Newtonian law of physics that we have. So I was talking to these people behind the scenes and
Uh,
I just had like an awakening and I was like, this is what I want to do.
well, those videos in particular, the Go Fast, the Tic
The
Tac,
gimbal.
and the gimbal, those ones in particular are probably the most fascinating, and they're the videos that you can look at them and say you can't prove that is a hoax or that is fake, to the point where the military couldn't figure out well, at least they wouldn't admit what the fuck they actually were.
Right,
um
right, right.
I mean, but what's his name, the retired pilot, Colonel Faber, who
Yeah,
flew
David
that.
Fravor.
Yeah, David
He's a
Fravor.
friend of mine.
Yeah, David Fravor, who flew that jet. I mean, the story alone is compelling enough. And I mean, you're talking about a guy who has a reputation, who is a pilot, not just any pilot, but he's like a Top Gun pilot. So
He is literally like he's Tom Cruise in Top Gun.
exactly.
That's who David Fravor is. Like he's literally so to give somebody who doesn't understand the gravity of what we're saying, a little spec. Now the Nimitz battle group, if we were to go to war right now, the Nimitz battle group would be first on scene. They're the first to defend the country. They're the first to arrive. That's the battle group that shows up first to when shit hits the fan. When the United States had a confrontation with China in the 90s and they were sending missiles over Taiwan, um, the Nimitz battle group went into the Taiwan Strait and just parked and literally it was literally just a show of force because
Yeah.
that's how scary that battle group is. And this Tic Tac, this 40-foot thing with no surfaces, no wings, no discernible means of propulsion. Now, what do we have to do to make a rocket fly? It's basically like a Roman candle. You light the fucking thing on fire and it shoots off, right? This thing had nothing and no heat signature, no fuel coming out of it. It was flying with no discernible means of propulsion. Now, when we call it a UFO, people are quick to say, okay, you're saying it's alien. No, that's absolutely not what the Navy is saying. They're saying it's unknown. So it could be human tech that is reverse engineered. And what we'll get into tonight is that most likely the Tic Tac is reverse engineered from craft that we have obtained through means of special access programs, black
So,
budget money.
so you think that this encounter from Colonel Fravor, that this was a reverse engineered craft?
I believe so.
And what's crazy enough as it is, I mean, this is a recreation. I think this is from the Phenomenon. Um, And that again, if you want to see a
Another James
documentary,
Fox movie.
another James Fox movie. If you want to see a great documentary about UFOs, the phenomenon is really really good. So it's like as good as the phenomenon or as phenomenon is. Moment of Contact.
It's so
It
much.
just it deep dived into
I have a good
into
story to
one
tell you about that.
story that was just so it's so amazingly compelling that if you watch Moment of Contact, I'll show you what it looks like right here. I swear it'll change your life. I mean, look, I watched this documentary, right? And by the time it was over, I was like, holy shit. I was like, this just changed my fucking life when it comes to UFOs. I mean, the amount of people that he spoke to about this topic and the conviction and the honesty that they were putting into their testimonials. I mean, you could see it. It was like, dude, they're not lying.
No.
Like, they're telling the honest truth.
And it's kind of scary.
It is. It is. It's very scary.
And like, I'm not gonna lie, like some of this subject that I get into, because I don't interview just, you know, Joe Schmo from Kentucky in his backyard. You know, I'm interviewing high level either military witnesses or like people like Commander Fravor, like Mario Woods, who had an encounter at a nuclear base. You know, so there's a connection between UFOs and nuclear technology. And we can get into
where the UFO essentially came down and hovered over
the missile silo.
Yeah, I heard. And again, it was obviously showing them that we're here, we're looking at that, you know, and
well, the surge of sightings. So you get a massive surge in sightings after the Trinity explosion. So when the United States was testing nuclear weapons, there was a surge in UFO sightings, like out of just a rocket, boom, out of the blue. And it's ironic because that's James Fox's first movie. It's called Out of the Blue, because literally it's like this phenomenon woke up one day. And it's, you know, a lot of people get into the ancient aliens, and it's like, okay, how about we just get the fucking people to admit that UFOs are real first, and then start talking about ancient aliens. Like, I don't have, it's, I get it. It's a TV show. Everyone likes to make fun of the fucking alien meme guy, you know, Georgios Tsoukalis. Everyone likes to make fun of him.
That's an easy way to make a channel. I mean, to make a show about UFOs, but that can appeal to the general audience who
for
some
sure,
of which don't really give a shit, and so they just want to hear some wild shit.
Yeah, because it's 90. And that's another thing with the UFO topic is you have to understand that with a topic that's either, you know, been covered up or labeled conspiracy by, you know, the CIA literally coined the term conspiracy theorist. And this is while they're running MK Ultra. So they're you know, trying to brainwash people, but they're also trying to cover up UFOs at the same time and telling other people who say they might have saw something that they're crazy, all while seemingly doing insane things themselves.
But I mean, one of the questions that, you know, I hear a lot is, why cover it up? Why not give total disclosure to the general public? You know, why spend all this time and effort to cover up a UFO alien? You know, to admit that there are alien species that don't come from this world, let alone maybe even this dimension. Why cover it up?
Well, I think it's a couple different things now, it could be a couple different things. Number one, sheer greed, right? So monopolization of the technology. So the whistleblower David Grush, who just came out, he came forward in an interview with Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal, who wrote the 2017 article in the New York Times. So they wrote a new article. It just came out in the debrief at the beginning of this month. So this is the guy that used to hand deliver the president his briefing every single day from the NGO, which is the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency.
About David Grush.
Yeah, David Grush. So he is blowing the whistle on crash retrieval programs, right? So he's saying that there's been a Cold War between the major powers of the world in the back of the, you know, off the books, black budget. This is above top secret, right? Presidents don't even have a need to know for this information because a president at the end of the day is a temporary employee. So you got these career bureaucrats and these career military men who think they own this technology, and they've continued to keep it out of the public eye by Eisenhower, many presidents warned us about the military industrial complex. Now, this is because you cannot hold private industry accountable. So we can't go to Lockheed Skunk Works, knock on the door, hand them a Freedom of Information Act, and say, show us what's in the hangar. They're a private company. So when the military got in bed with private aerospace, Eisenhower lost control of these special access programs and these black budget operations. So he tried to warn us about it, but by that time it was already too late.
And that's the problem too, is that all these private companies that are involved with this, they have their own special interests in terms of like what technology that they're able to get their hands on.
Yeah, imagine you come out with the technology that changes the world overnight. Yeah. I mean, you've cemented yourself as not just a Fortune 100 company, Fortune 500 company. You've solidified yourself in history as the absolute change.
I can see the guy in the reflection. He's like, oh.
Yeah.
So going back now to the film Moment of Contact. Okay, so he's stepped out right now. Moment of Contact is a documentary by James Fox. It talks about an encounter in Brazil, in Varginha, Brazil, that is essentially the Roswell of Brazil. And now James Fox goes in there and he interviews a number of eyewitnesses and people who experienced this encounter, this phenomenon in Varginha, Brazil, and it was so unbelievable what he was able to uncover. And I think that the most compelling part of all of it, I mean, there were so many parts that were just like, holy crap, but the part that really got me was 3 girls that encountered, which he even ended up naming the documentary after the scene.
Yeah, the moment
of contact. The 3 girls were walking through an alley, and all of a sudden they smelt this sulfur, rotten egg type of smell, and they're like, God, what is that? And they look over off to the side, and there is an alien crouched down against the wall.
Do you have the picture?
I do.
Yeah.
And it is unbelievable. This is the image right here that they drew after the artist drew based on their descriptions. And you can see it was a sweaty, slimy kind of looking alien. And I mean, look, if you're in Brazil, it's going to be probably pretty humid and hot. So I'm sure this guy was not feeling the best.
Yeah, so it took place in January, and even in January, Brazil, at high noon, it's hot. It's hot. And imagine if you're a being that is from a world that doesn't have a sun like ours. Like, because people have theorized why the eyes are red, and the only real conclusion for something like that would be if it was from a world that was maybe had a sun that was dying. Or on its way to dying, and it was really low light conditions.
Yeah, because the red eyes are very interesting, and it has the 3 horns on top, or whatever you call it.
Because it kind of looks like your typical like gray alien that people describe, but with the red eyes and the peaks on its head. That's what separates it.
But all 3 girls gave the same description of what this thing looked like, and not to mention so the 3 girls saw it. 2 of them ran away after a minute or so because they were just like, holy shit, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go get mom. The other girl stayed there and said how it spoke to her telepathically, telling her that it was scared and needed help. And we've heard this before in other alien encounters, obviously, that they speak telepathically. And if you look back on some of the interviews with Bob Lazar talks about how inside of the UFOs there was no controls, there was no joystick or anything. It was almost as if they're controlling it with their mind, because and it would make sense if you have an advanced advanced civilization. I mean, perhaps within their, within this race or others, they control it telepathically as opposed to using, physical controls.
Yeah, there was testimony. Now again, this is like, I mean, we're going way off the reserve. Now, again, I understand how this sounds. Like to someone who's just passing by, this may sound like absolutely nuts, but it's ironic that we're doing the show tonight because I spoke to Marco Leal, who's the primary Brazilian researcher in Moment of Contact. So he's the guy that's, next to James Fox.
Right. Okay. Yes.
Pretty much in every scene. He's translating a lot of it.
Yeah, he's the guy who's with him. He's right next to him the whole time. Yeah.
Right next to him the whole time. So that's why I had on the show yesterday. And he told me that, so there are doctors that came forward that have all seen a video of this being that is laying on a table, and they've all cited the same doctor who had the video, who had it in his private collection, like private. These doctors were shown it after the fact. They all separately pinpointed this one guy, and they said he's the one who has the video. He has since passed away, so there's like a little scramble between his estate and James Fox. James Fox is offering like $200,000 for the video if they can find it, because they're right now they're going through. So trust me, this is not over. We're trying to find the evidence that would literally show the world, because multiple military personnel came forward saying they filmed it. Multiple doctors had filmed it. There's so many people that have the almost exact same testimony. They all talk about the smell, how it stayed in their nose for 2 weeks and it was like ammonia, sulfur. They all talked about how they knew right from looking at it and smelling it that it was a non-human intelligence. This wasn't just an animal in the jungle. This was a being not of this earth, and this is confirmed by, in my mind, Carlos de Souza. I think he's one of the eyewitnesses that brings a lot of credibility to the story. The guy disappeared for 30 years because the military basically said, if you talk about what you saw, things are going to get really weird for you. And he said, he admitted, he said he was a coward and he ran away.
Well, he ran away. His story too is amazing in itself. The guy's driving on the road, heading to, I think, his brother's house to go do whatever.
No, he was going to fly. So back in the day, before drones, they had the RC planes.
Yes, he was going to go fly the planes. And on the way there, he looks up and he sees, again, a Tic Tac shaped, pill shaped craft, maybe even cigar shaped.
Cigar was the common phrase, yeah.
Yeah, but still a very similar type of look, flying across the horizon, and part of it was on fire. Like it likely been struck by lightning,
And it wasn't emitting. So when you think, when a craft, when an aircraft, one of our aircraft is on fire, jet fuel is going to be burning. So it's going to be burning this thick black smoke. But he says it was pushing this white vapor out the back. This is confirmed also by the farmers that are in the beginning of the film, who also give testimony about it. It looked like it was like weebling and wobbling. Yes. And it was having trouble, and it was shooting white vapor out the back. And they watched it go over their farm, and that's where Carlos saw it. And then that's where the crash takes place. And
Carlos describes how it goes, and then it spins, and then it wobbles more, and then it just drops. So what does he do? He pulls off, right? As being a human being, and I say that in the sense of like doing what he feels is the right thing to do. He
didn't think aliens were inside.
No, he's thinking like, oh, there's someone's hurt.
Yeah.
So he goes over there. He drives down there, gets out of the car, and he sees this craft crash into the ground. And I want to say at that point, that's the military showed up soon after.
It's
and told
very,
them to basically
very soon.
Fuck off. But they had mentioned, I think, that there was a creek bed near it. And so they think that some of the beings, escaped because I mean, frankly, if you crash, what are you gonna do? You gonna stand there and wait? No, don't. I mean, so maybe these beings took off because soon after they had the entire city on lockdown.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
As a human pilot, what would you do if your craft was going down and you had no means of saving the situation? What would you do?
If I'm in a different country, then
No, no,
I
no, no.
would.
I'm saying, as a pilot, what would you do? You would ejectocito, cuz, right?
Yeah, you get the hell out
Right?
of there. You eject
So,
exactly.
so if we have that kind of technology, I mean,
Why
I
wouldn't
could.
they?
Why wouldn't they? I think that they escaped the craft before it hit the ground.
It wouldn't make sense that
Yeah.
they escaped the craft before they hit the ground, and they ended up in Virginia. And everyone's talking about how the military is all over the city. They have roadblocks. They're searching, and people are asking what's going on. They're saying, "Oh, we're just looking for someone," or I don't even know if they told them
No,
that.
they
And
didn't. They didn't.
they
They didn't tell them anything. They said just go
anything.
back in your houses, and you don't have you. This is under. They were citing national security. So
Right, right,
oftentimes when we see these crash retrievals, you'll hear national. This is a national security threat. You'll hear this thrown around a lot,
exactly,
and that
exactly.
gets people a little bit spooked because, especially when I mean, they were pointing AR-15s at his face,
Yeah,
and they're saying back away, get the fuck out of here. So
and so that they mean business. That it's fucking serious. And so, and
So
then
imagine in Varginha. Varginha is one of the bigger cities in Brazil.
yes,
So imagine the military rolled into downtown Chicago and basically locked it down.
exactly.
That's
That's
what
a big
happened.
fucking order to
Yeah,
pull off for
yeah.
what? And they won't even
So
tell you
my
what.
question, my question,
Yeah.
my first question is, how did the military get there so quick? So why did Carlos see it go down? And then how did the military show up? He said 5 to 6 minutes after he arrived, they came from the opposite direction. Now I asked Marco about this, and he said we had testimony from an air traffic controller that we did use in the film, but it didn't actually make it into the final cut for time reasons. But the air traffic controller said that NORAD warned the Brazilian Air Force of something that was entering their airspace that wasn't so any craft that is flying in the United States under North American command, so that's Canada and the United States, NORAD, they'll basically have a transponder that sends out a signal, and it's a set of numbers. That's how that they track these craft, and they know
Right.
which ones they are. Now, if something's first off not emitting one of those signals, that's a red flag right away. Next, these things, these anomalies on the radar are moving at speeds that we just can't even fathom. So when I think so Marco also says that NORAD gave the Brazilian government a heads up, said something's about to come into your airspace. We're on our way, but take care of it for now. Handle it
Yes.
till we get there. And an American helicopter landed one day after the capture of these beings, and did not ask for permission to land.
Yeah.
So
And they even said too. They said USAF, United States Air Force.
USAF, yes.
And they said two. Well, I think I remember them saying that two planes eventually landed, and they split up the debris. Oh, no, that was Roswell. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's Roswell.
that's
They went
Roswell.
to
The
Wright
two planes,
Patterson
but the helicopter showed up and they took the bodies.
yeah.
And so, for everyone at home who hasn't seen Moment of Contact, there was a point in which, after the military has the city on lockdown, and mind you, this is 1996 when this took place. So, yes, it happened, a while ago, but not that far, not that long
No,
ago.
but a lot of these cases, like look at Roswell. If Roswell has been so muddied that because
Absolutely.
it's the waters are so muddy with the Roswell case that I don't even like to talk about it because there's just so much dirt and like just absolute nonsense that people have made up and put into the story. It's like a game of telephone. And
It really
with
is.
these, yeah, and the story just gets changed. But 1996, I mean, 1947 is a whole different ball game, right?
Oh
That's a
yeah,
whole different world. 1996, I mean, I was 3 years old.
yeah. I was in
So
high school,
yeah,
and so
so
and then here you have this thing happening. So basically, at one point, I want to say the girls had the encounter, and then after that is when the you have these two
the Marco
soldiers.
Cherise, yeah,
Yes, these two soldiers driving. In the passenger seat is Marco Shirizi, and all of a
Eric
sudden,
Lopes is driving.
yes,
So
and
and they're best friends. So they're these to give a little bit of preface, because I got a little bit more of the backstory that they didn't get to in the film. So Marco Shirizi and Eric Lopes were childhood best friends.
and they
Eric
didn't cover that in the movie too.
no,
I
and
don't think they
Eric
did.
Eric Lopes is married to Marco Shirizi's sister.
Mhm. Now they did talk about that. I remember that. I was like, wow, what, holy shit! So these
Yeah.
guys knew each other, and
So
and so they're driving around, and then they see this being run across the street. And what does Marco do? Fucking jumps out of the car, badass, tackles the alien. And at this point, I doubt the alien has any energy to do anything at this point. Picks
yeah.
him up like he's holding a rag doll, and they're looking at it like, what the hell is that? You know? And so what do? They drive this thing to a hospital. Okay.
Yeah. Regional hospital in Virginia. And dude, when when I say that there's one person that I would like to talk to bring back from the dead to talk to, it's Marco Shirizi. Because
Oh, absolutely.
he knew. And I mean, I don't know if you want to spoil it for anybody, but his fate, it just wasn't supposed to be like that, I don't think. And
Well, it's one thing. Okay, so I mean, if you haven't seen it, go see it. But we are going to spoil a bit of it because it's going to help the conversation. So Marco Shirizi ends up dying from this
bacterial infection that they threw
bacterial infection.
which in 1996 nobody dies of a bacterial infection, but
Right.
the doctor the doctor said that he threw the kitchen sink at Marco and his body. So what I'm referring to is they tried everything possible for 2 weeks. This guy was in the hospital, just basically his body was rejecting itself and it was just collapsing on itself. And by the end, he had lost like 10 pounds in a week. He was just within 2 weeks, he was on death's door. And ultimately, his life, he didn't survive the encounter. But apparently, he had a little gash. Now, he might have got it. We suspect. So he may have gotten it earlier in the day, but it had to have been fresh and open when he grabbed this alien. Something was on him. So the testimony from other people in the military X in particular, which is some of the most incredible testimony I've ever heard from military X, said that Marco had this sticky substance all over him. This would really explain that sulfuric or ammonia, that smell that people are smelling. So what if these creatures were or beings? I don't like the word creature. What if these beings were like amphibious to some degree? And they did escape into the river, and that's how they got away from the craft. That's how they got to Virginia. The river is right there. It travels to Virginia, and it would make sense. The eyes would make it would make a little bit more sense, but that's just speculation. I don't want to put that in too many people's heads. But these beings clearly weren't in their own habitat, so they were very, very weak. So he was able to scoop the thing up, but he something got into his bloodstream and just shut his body down.
Well,
And the medical records are classified above top secret. Why would that be? Why would that be?
yeah, exactly. I mean, you
His
talk about
sister tells a story that she says that she was in the hospital with him and it was one of the final days, and he knew that he was going to go, that he was probably going to die. And he told her, she asked, she said, are what they reporting on the news? Because this was major news in Brazil. It was all over the TV because
Oh
the
yeah.
three girls were, they were being interviewed by almost every news station, almost every UFO researcher had made their way down to Brazil at this point. This was headline news in Brazil. They're it's a different culture. When you go down there, they just talk about it. They don't. There's no stigma like there is here, where people think you're wearing a fucking tinfoil hat. Um, so she asked, she's like, "Are what they saying? Is it true?" And he said, "It's the biggest story in human history," and that's all he said. So
And,
I find that to be
exactly. And if you look at it, right, I mean, if you have, okay, so if we go back to even like when the Europeans came to America, right, to the United States, well, then it was just, another continent, and you
yes,
had the Native Americans living there, right? Once they came in contact with them, things like smallpox, things like that they were immune to, is now killing them off. And so you could argue that this is the same type of thing where it's like,
same
he's
interaction.
secreting some kind of, oil or liquid that, for
Absolutely,
him doesn't hurt him,
absolutely.
but has a bacteria in it that is fatal to a human being who has never experienced that type of bacteria before in their lives. I mean, when you look at the girls that they talk to as well, I mean, there was no reason for them to lie about this. There was no reason for them to pretend
And
like this wasn't
again,
real.
and again, not one of those girls said they saw an alien. They said they saw a demon.
Yeah.
They did not know. Now, again, remember, no one in Virginia ever said alien. They all thought it was because their religious upbringing. They see something with red eyes and they thought it was a demon. And they were told, Military X was even told this was supernatural, supernatural, however they pronounce it. I wanted to say it with like a little bit of oomph, but the command that came down was, we can't tell the public about this because it was of supernatural origin and it would collapse civilization as we know it. That's what they were told.
It would collapse civilization as we know it. And that's the thing too, is that when you talk about, total disclosure, to me, the biggest thing that comes up, and we're going to get back to this documentary in just a second, but just because we're talking about this, it feels like the biggest thing that comes up in my mind is when it comes to society and why it would be hard for them to grasp the idea of an extraterrestrial presence. To me, religion has a huge impact on that, because most people's religion tells them that extraterrestrials don't exist.
Right.
And so if you tell them that, yeah, they do exist and they're here and they've been here for who knows how long, that's going to throw off so many people's.
We'll take it a step further. So, what if I told you? So, remember when you asked me earlier, why might this be a secret?
Right.
What if they are our creators? What if they manipulated DNA?
Yeah,
and,
no, I mean,
and
it
they have
would
a
definitely make
vested
sense.
interest in us? That's a very sobering thought.
It is in the sense that, when you look back at different writings, different things from our ancient past, you would see it would make a lot of sense that there was an extraterrestrial presence happening thousands of years ago. And so let's say, something like that did happen, where they took these apes and they, adjusted their DNA and then slowly but surely created, Homo sapien. And then, kind of see how are they going to work on this planet? And then they've been watching us ever since. But now we're starting to get to the point where it's like, okay, hey, they're starting to figure some shit out. We need to really get in there and figure out what's going on, because you can only contain something for so long before a civilization is going to start figuring out how to, create nuclear weapons, create,
Yes.
these advanced weaponry and technology.
Well, that's a leading hypothesis. Is so And I like to think about this as well. So human beings would never have existed. So if the dinosaurs were not wiped out by the comet, human beings would have never survived on this planet. We would have been puppy chow to T-Rexes, right?
Absolutely.
Was the destruction of the dinosaurs an accident,
That's a good question. I mean, we'll never really know per
or
se,
was
but
it on purpose?
it could have easily been like, hey, this is a good spot. This is a great planet. Let's wipe these guys out.
So it's crazy, right? Once you go down the rabbit hole, you start opening these doors.
Well, and that's the thing. Like when you like, for instance, like the movie Prometheus. Like to me, I actually really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed Covenant after that too, because it makes a lot of sense. Like, hey, if there was a species out there that created another species, I mean, like this is sort of how it would go.
Yeah,
it's like it's like taking a lab experiment to its greatest level of let's do it, but let's do it on a planetary level and see how these beings
what they do,
evolve.
how they evolved. It's a seeding life in the cosmos. So I mean, take it back to the Men in Black saying, right? 100 years, let's say 1,000 years ago, we knew that the Earth was flat, right?
Yes.
100 years ago, we knew that we were the center of the universe. 50 years ago, we knew that we were the only life, the Men in Black one. So imagine what you'll know tomorrow. So it basically goes down that line. I was paraphrasing. I wish I had the quote. It's a great, great.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So imagine what you'll know tomorrow, and I think it's a really nuanced take for someone to look at this topic and say there's nothing to it, because that's just, I mean, if you want to keep your head buried in the sand, by all means do it, but don't label me a conspiracy theorist for asking questions. And that's all I like to do, is ask questions. I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand who pilots these UFOs. I've never seen an alien. I've never seen a being. I've never seen a non-human intelligence, but there is so much evidence pointing to the fact that there is something that is flying through our skies with impunity, meaning we can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
The government knows about it. They know much more than they're letting on, and they have not admitted to this fact. Now, I think that criminal actions have been taken to maybe undergo the secrecy. So murder,
absolutely,
murder may have been committed. David Grush has even made these claims. So again, the credibility of David Grush alone is it's grounds to take him serious, to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, let's look into it. It sounds crazy, but let's look into it.
Mm-hmm.
The internet, drop the internet to someone 100 years ago and it's magic. Advanced technology often is dissociated with magic. So here again, we have this commonplace. So this stuff that looks like magic to us, how is that craft flying? It's not burning jet fuel. Oh, it's magic. It must not be. It must not be real either. It must be a mass hallucination. No, that's not how. But I've taken enough mushrooms and acid to know that 10 people in the same room, you give them all the same mushroom, and they're not going to have the same experience.
They will not. They will not see the same thing.
Yeah.
Even if they were all on acid, believe me.
You're not.
You might convince somebody to see the kind of same thing you're seeing, but it's never going to be exact.
No.
This stuff right here, like when we go back to Moment of Contact, this was exact. I mean, every single person talked about the smell, that the sulfuric rotten egg smell.
By the way, let me jump. So what do you know, like biblical lore?
Yes.
What is often associated with sulfur in the Bible?
What? I don't know that one.
Demons.
There you go.
Demons. So sulfur is often what people smell after a demonic possession or a demon is in the area. So not only does this thing have fucking red eyes, but it smells like sulfur. So immediately these very religious people, I mean, these are people that celebrate Day of the Dead, right? Like they talk to their dead ancestors. Like these people, they're just so they're so fine tuned that this. I mean, this is straight out of The Exorcist for them.
Well, but at the same time, though, like, so even that being something that, that demons are associated with, right? And that's something that probably has been written, for hundreds of years.
Yeah, I wonder where we got that idea.
So how long have these fuckers been around?
Yeah.
Doing whatever they're doing.
You know how
for
art
thousands of years.
Yeah, art, life imitates art, and vice versa. And I'm not trying to shit on anyone's religious beliefs, but the Bible is a collection of stories that was like selected by the church, and things were taken out of it. So say what you will, but it is a collection of stories that were assembled by men, right? So at the end of the day, there's room for error. Am I saying is it nonsense? Absolutely not. Every religion in our globe talks about a flood and then a messenger who comes after that flood with knowledge of rebuilding ancient civilization or rebuilding civilization, not ancient. It's ancient to us. But all of these religions talk about this event. So I think it's naive to go on the notion that all religion is story. It's not, it's fake. But I also think it's naive to believe in it down to the T, down to the I, if that makes sense.
No, it really is. And I mean, when you look at what Graham Hancock has been pushing. Oh,
God, I love him.
Has been pushing about the Younger Dryas. It makes so much sense that all
you're really for you're really well versed for this.
I'll tell you this. I mean, like my biggest passions are sports, pop culture, and this. And so,
really,
it's always been that way. In fact, when I first started a channel, that was originally like the idea. Like, well, maybe I should just do UFO shit and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, no, I had friends who were already doing this, so it just felt right. But
yeah.
But like I said, after I saw Moment of Contact, I was like, okay, well, this is the moment of contact.
Kind of go through like an awakening. Yeah.
Well, I was like, this is the moment that I need to go contact Ty and say, hey, dude, I just saw this fucking movie. This is out of control.
Yeah, and it just so happened that I just secured that. So I just talked to so when you had said, hey, I just saw a Moment of Contact, I had literally talked to James Fox on the phone a week before. So
wow.
It's the synchronicity of it was kind of creepy. And I'm not saying that you asking to do this was creepy,
right?
But
just the way it came together,
and then I talked to he put me in touch with Marco because he's filming a new film right now, and he said, I'm a little busy right now. He's like, I'll come on your show, but let me put you in touch with Marco. We'll get him on the show first, and it will be like a preemptive thing. So like you get Marco, then you get me. So I was like, fair shake, and James is so gracious. He lives a couple hours from me, so we're gonna try to do something in person.
That's awesome.
So I can't wait for that, man. I can't.
But no, I mean that sounds amazing. I can't wait to see that. You recently though, you had on a guest. My phone is like freaking out right now. There it goes. Sometimes these phones you tap on them and they don't want to open up. And you're like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But you had it. I think his name was it Darcy Weir?
Darcy Weir, yeah. He made the Secret Space UFO saga.
Yes. And that was a really interesting podcast episode where he's essentially, it's like you brought him on, you were just like, go.
Pretty
He's
much
the kind of guy he'll just go and go. Because I was listening to it while I was making dinner, and I was just like, and like you weren't saying much because I was like, Ty isn't really saying anything, but he doesn't have to because he's just going off right now. Like that guy was just on, like he was just pedal to the metal.
There
And
are
so
certain people in this subject that if you drop a dime, that's all they need.
yeah, exactly. And some people can do that, and they can just go on and on and on and on.
Literally.
I had Robert Meyer Burnett on the show one time, and he's another guy. He can just talk. You can just let him go, and you don't have to say anything. You're just like, go, dude, go.
Yeah, I actually related. It was funny. I made my first like connection to the pot. I called Jimmy Church, the John Campia of UFO podcasts, because he's like he's the first one who like I don't
Established
know,
himself.
established himself as
Right.
like other than like Coast to Coast and George Norrie and George Knapp. Other than that, there was really nothing until Jimmy Church. But yeah, Darcy. So I think NASA knows a lot more. I think NASA.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think it's blatantly obvious that NASA is one of the biggest perpetuators of this cover up.
Absolutely.
Because if you think who's got the biggest, the baddest, and the most up to date tech when it comes to not just observing the planet, but observing deep space. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, or I'm going to tell you something that I think. So I think disclosure is being slowly rolled out for either one of two reasons.
Okay.
I think they know something's either on its way and they have an ETA. So when you track something in deep space, they could tell approximately how long it's going to take before our path crosses it, right? So and that's how they determine if if an asteroid's going to be a threat. That's how so they're always looking, they're always scanning. So what if they found something that's headed its way here, and they know that it's going to cause mass panic if all of a sudden, because I'm 15 stories up, the Boston skyline's right behind me. You just can't see it because it's dark. What if a fucking thing just showed up, into the sky, Independence Day style? People are gonna freak the fuck out. They're gonna lose their minds, and they're gonna automatically. I just picture Arrival, that movie, Arrival. People just the world would shut down. Everyone would go into sequester. They would just, and they take it upon themselves to either it's fight or flight at that point.
Right. Right.
And maybe they're trying to avoid that. So slowly rolling out the truth after 75 years of covering it up is a necessity. And that's one of the scarier thoughts that I've had. I think I'm sorry. That's one of the most like innocent versions of the things that I've thought about.
Oh, I mean, absolute innocence. Because I mean, if another species is coming here in large quantity at that, you don't know what their
I'm talking about
are.
Dark Side Ready the Armada. Like they're seeing that shit coming.
Exactly. But to me, like the biggest thing is that you have all these private companies like SpaceX and all these companies that are developing technologies where they're going to travel the moon. They're going to travel around the moon. They're going to start sending, things farther out into space. And so there comes a point where you have to ask yourself, how long can we keep this secret within our ranks? You can't, because eventually
one
mankind
of these private
is going to reach out on their own. And the crazy
well, they're doing it. Arguably, people are doing it.
But the crazy thing about that is just the big picture of like mankind is going to reach out and find out on their own, even though we have NASA, even though we have the military who's working on back engineering all this stuff. It takes a private company to reach out there and discover these things, to really open up what the truth is about extraterrestrials. And to me, it's not so much that extraterrestrials are they've been here because they saw that we had nuclear capacity, and then that's when they started showing a lot more. I think they've always been here. I think they've been here since the beginning of time, and because I mean, there's so many.
I've heard it a lot. Yeah,
There's so
I
many
mean, I have.
biblical writings and scriptures
Even Christopher Columbus saw an orb.
yeah. I mean, he might have
literally
been tripping on some mushrooms too, but
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the first documented, written down sightings of a. So Christopher Columbus writes about how he saw this burning ball of light in the sky, and I mean, what does that sound like to you? It sounds like a classic orb, and he said it helped guide him to the new world. Well, again, you start to ask these questions. People back then, they didn't write something down if it was not of use. They only like Columbus in those diaries, he's not writing things down that are of like that are conjecture or like Billy John got scurvy today, day 74. No, he's talking about the grand scheme in these captain's logs. So for him to put that in a captain's log, that's going to be pure, like it's going to be taken by the Spanish government when he gets back, and it's going to be looked at. What is he going to say? So there was a burning ball of light in the sky, and it guided me to the new world. I mean, it sounds very grandioso, but today we would just say, "Oh, you saw a UFO." That's it. Yeah.
Well, and it goes farther back. There's so many other, writings, such as in India with the Vimanas. They talk about these chariots that emitted all these light, and they would fly around, and that at one point there was this huge war where these cross shaped, like a T, like a cross shaped objects were flying at each other, and who's to say then, thousands of years ago, those weren't their versions of fighter jets. You know what I mean? And they were having a war over probably the property of Earth. Who knows? Yeah. And so that's why when you look at, okay, there's a really shitty movie out there. It turned out to be shitty. It was what's it called? One with Mila Kunis and the guy from Magic Mike.
God, I know what you're talking about.
Jupiter Ascending. Okay,
Jupiter Ascending. Yeah.
Shitty movie, right? I didn't really like it. However, the concept that we were put here by another species so that we could be harvested when the time is right. To me, that was such a fascinating idea. I was like, dude, that makes that. Yeah, I would buy the idea that like that could be a possibility. And
well, what if there's another theory that just popped in? So someone hit me with this one day, and I almost I don't know, man. I had an existential crisis after he said it to me. He said, "What if this is an ancient civilization that got away from ancient cataclysm that was about to happen, and now they're returning, and so they're us from the past, but they're here to shit." So it gets very, very fucked up. So you start going in all these different ways, and you're like,
right.
So there's a rumored. And the reason I went on my path is because I have a little bit more information than your average person. I'm not saying I have sources or I know more. I just have a lot more stories that I've been told. That right. I have a maybe I can start connecting dots. There was a landing that was, so there was a documentary called UFOs Past, Present, and Future, and this was made in partnership with the CIA and at the time President Nixon. He was up for re-election. This is before Watergate, so he wanted to show the public that he was pro-science, right. And apparently there was this craft that landed at Holloman Air Force Base, and it lands, so it like kind of like looks like it's wobbling, and then it lands, and they're taping it. They're like, you know, this is apparent. I don't. Again, this is all secondhand testimony, but apparently in the footage, these beings that get out, they look like Native Americans, but with lighter skin.
Mhm.
And the hieroglyphics didn't look exactly like like ours. So again, you just got to ask yourself these questions. And I'm not trying to push, like, I don't want anyone to believe anything because I said so. I want anyone to go ask yourself these questions, directly comprehend what you might think is going on, because the, at, at this point, I don't think we could truly rule anything out. They could be us from the future. They could be interdimensional. They could be from inside the planet Earth. The Native American people talk about the sky
Right,
people,
right.
and how they came out of the ground to save them. So there's just so much. There's so much.
Well, and then you talk about, UFOs that have been seen coming out of the ocean. Now, if you're going to have any installations on Earth, where would you have them? You'd have them in the ocean and on the backside of the moon, because, well, shit, these guys can't even see the backside of the moon. So let's just populate the
And
backside.
by the way, we are. How is it so perfectly set up that the moon is in a lockstep with us, so that we never see the backside of it?
Yeah.
And most moons aren't as perfect and aren't as big as our moon. Our moon seems to be very peculiar.
Extremely. And you look at some of these moons, like, the moons of Saturn and moons of Mars, some of them are just essentially big ass asteroids that are caught in their gravitational field and have become moons. I mean,
Yeah,
they're grand in size, but
but our moon is exactly 33%, whatever. It's almost like it's almost too perfect. It's almost too perfect that it stays in a lockstep with us. So we never see the backside of it. We always see the same side of the moon. The moon does not, it does rotate, but it doesn't rotate like we think, like
exactly.
like, you know what I mean? It rotates around us,
But even that,
but it doesn't move its
No.
side.
And there's so many different things and so many theories you can go off of when it comes to the moon. Even that it's its own, like established. It's like a structure, right? But I mean, look, to me, it feels more like, look, the moon is what it is, but it's. I think that it's a out of convenience. They were like, hey, look, their moon doesn't rotate. We can do whatever we need to on the backside, but on the backside, and they will never even see that. But at a certain point, when human beings these private companies start to launch their own satellites, launch their own craft out into space and to go to the moon or to even orbit the moon, they're going to see these beings, these structures that may or may not even be there. I think they're definitely there. There's enough evidence that shows that they are there, but I think they're definitely going to run into that. I think that scares them. And I think that's what eventually is going to lead to disclosure, because they know that it's only a matter of time before one of these private companies sends a satellite out there, and then that information gets back to the public. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we've been, the general audience, we talk about that in pop culture. We say, oh, the general audiences don't care, or these general audiences. And so when it comes to, UFOs, when it comes to total disclosure, it's the general audience, that same concept that you're like, hey,
that's what we're trying to
exactly, like, how do we inform them so that they are able to kind of understand what the fuck they're even looking at? Because when you look back at, ancient writings and ancient scriptures, they are essentially describing craft and sightings based on what they know and what they can compare it to.
Yeah, the Romans said they used to call the UFOs, or so again, we're drawing lines here. They used to see flying, flaming shields in the sky. So again, you Romans, right? So a lot of Romans, decorated armor, they'd have nice shields. So when they would see something in the sky like that, They say it was a flaming shield that was spinning. Now, again, if someone were to see that today, I think it's just changed over time with what we've called it. And this goes to, and this could be said about many things. Again, with the magic versus technology. So, what our ancestors may have thought was a Vimana, or this ancient flying Walmart, basically is what they describe. This huge like pyramid that flew. Well, what if it was just a UFO that was advanced technology? So they only had, it's not like they had a word for it. They didn't have the word UFO, unidentified flying object. So they just called it what they called it. So they used, they in the same way that we have these petroglyphs, when they made these petroglyphs and these monoliths and these things that have been created, they didn't spend time. Our ancient, like with the pyramids and all that, they didn't spend time carving all those things out for no reason. They did it because they were trying to inform the next. So again, we see it with the native cultures, right? Stories get passed down by word of mouth, but you don't just get these stories if you're just a general tribe member. You have to be like a shaman, and the stories are passed down not like a game of phone like we would see today, but they're passed down in these sacred ways. So the stories that the natives tell, they're not far off from what the real story that either began the legend or began the story, what it was. Because again, these stories, they're held as almost as sacred to these people. So again, they didn't just do this for no reason. They were trying to set a record for us in the future. I think we're 100 years from where we should be. And that's because of government secrecy and cover up. I think the government is, I think, well, I think, I don't think, because when I say government, it paints a very broad picture. There's a lot of good people in government. 90%, 99% of people in government are probably great people. But there's this 1% that think they own the world. And I'm pretty sure they're the ones that we have to worry about. And they're the ones who have a lot of money to lose if the oil industry goes away.
Right.
If the banks, if people stop having faith in government, they stop needing government. And when the government no longer has power over the citizenship, where do we go from there? Right. So I think, again, the secrecy, it was put on us at a time when maybe the human race could not handle another thing. A lot of these sightings were started right after World War II. We just got out of the biggest war we were ever in, and we're sitting in the Cold War now, when at any moment the threat of the Russians was looming. People forget how scary every single day was for people in the 70s and 60s and 70s when the Cold War was going on, because every day there was just the red threat of
every day.
Every single day that you thought this could be the end of the world today. And what if the military found out back then and they were like, shit, we can't tell them just yet. And then it just got buried, and they just never wanted to tell us because they never knew how to after covering it up for so long. So again, so many things could have happened, but I think we're at a point now where people, I think not, if you were to like survey 1,000 people, 900 of them would say that we're not alone in the universe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand how you still can say that we are alone in the universe. You know,
and again, Varginha, Brazil is not the only case.
No,
it is one of the best, but it's not the only case. For your audience that listens now or in the future, I would highly recommend looking into the Rendlesham Forest incident, which is a really, really bizarre case that took place at Bentwater, which is a joint, it's a joint European American base in in England. Was it Rendlesham? It was at England.
I think it's England. Yeah.
England. So, I mean, this was that I mean, that was one of their elite striking positions and armaments for nuclear weapons at the time of the event. And basically, UFO were seen shutting down nuclear weapons.
And to me, that just screams that they're trying to let them know, like, we know what you have here. We know
And
what
this, and it
is.
doesn't, and it doesn't mean. What I think it is, and Robert Salas, who was one of the people who was in the launch control facility, so he's the guy that turns the key when the president says launch the nuclear weapons. This is the guy that we trusted to turn the fucking nuclear bomb key. The ICBMs that are at Minot Air Force Base, we trusted this guy with that capability. At any moment, he can turn the key and send nuclear, set the world into World War III.
Yeah.
This man tells us that something was seen hovering over Minot Air Force Base. This is separate from Rendlesham. So again, common theme is nuclear weapons seem to be at the forefront of this phenomenon lately. So nuclear weapons are also not connected to each other. So they might have, so Minot Air Force Base or Malmstrom Air Force Base, they might have 10 nuclear missile silos, 10 ICBM missiles, but none of them are connected to each other. That is to ensure that if one goes offline, it doesn't affect another one. 10 of these things went down sequentially. And it was like when they asked Robert Salas, what do you think that this craft, if it's true, what do you think the message was? And he said the message was clear. Drop these fucking things to the bottom of the deepest ocean and never look back. Nuclear weapons are not the way to go.
Well, and you know, some would argue like, well, if they're in contact with our governments, you know, they would just tell them that. But no government is going to say, okay, I'll disassemble all my nuclear warheads and ICBMs because you told me to. You know, they're going to say, well, that's a good idea, but I'm just going to, you know, not listen to you for my own safety.
Absolutely. Yeah. Stubborn. Very, very stubborn.
Exactly.
This notion of mutually assured destruction can only last so long. Till some crazy idiot like the next Hitler decides he doesn't give a fuck because he's about to get killed anyway and decides to take the planet with him.
And that's the thing too, is that, you know, I've heard arguments of, you know, why don't, if there are extraterrestrials, why don't they just go and just vaporize or get rid of the nuclear warheads from this planet? I mean, I think it's still a case of they're not going to show up here and, you know, alter
the prime initiative, right?
Exactly. I mean, and that's one argument that can be made, but at the end of the day, it's like, look,
well, we can't expect them if shit pops off, we can't expect them to stop it,
right?
Like I'm not saying any prayers to the ETs if they exist, that if Putin were to launch a nuclear weapon that they intervene. People have speculated that this could be the case, that what if they're here from the past or from the future to stop something from happening.
I've heard that too, but I mean, honestly,
that's another theory that's pretty dark.
Definitely.
It's pretty dark.
But I think that, you know, what we're dealing with here is either beings from an alternate dimension or, you know, another planet, obviously, and another, you know, another planet, because I mean, there are so many accounts of different types of extraterrestrials. Now, granted, I do feel like some of these extraterrestrials are, you know, you're only seeing what they want you to see. But if there are that many different extraterrestrials, I mean, look, if you're going to abduct somebody, you know, like, okay, I'm going to look like, you know, a human who's got
your dead brother.
Yeah, or, you know, like the Nordic
or the
aliens.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can trust me. You know what I mean? Like, look, I'm beautiful. I'm you know, Or they could be a separate race that's just how they look, and that's how their genetics are, where they just look magnificent and big. And then you got your grays, and you got all the different types. So it's funny because when we talk about the being from Virginia, I mean, yes, like you were saying earlier, he looks just like a typical gray alien, except for the red eyes and the horns. Now, imagine if these beings have been around this planet for thousands of years. And let's just say their intentions aren't really the best of intentions, but similar to humans, they're going to do what's best for them.
Yes.
And that these are regarded as demons, as the devil, because this is how they look.
And this is how they've acted so they've acted indifferent towards human beings, giving the notion that they're malevolent. So I'm sure you've heard of Dr. Stephen Greer.
Yes.
So Dr. Stephen Greer is widely renowned as a leading expert in the UFO field. But his claim is that so he's one of these guys that charges $3,000. Now, okay, so I want to preface this by saying this is why there's a bad look for the UFO community. It's because people like Dr. Greer. He may have started with good intention, and his movies, ultimately, I think they do have good content, and I think he means well. I just think he kind of parked his car and decided to make as much money as he could. So he charges like $3,000 for you to go meditate with him for a weekend and call extraterrestrial civilizations with your mind.
But that's the thing, is that I think for some, it became a case of content creation at different levels. And so for him, I think maybe that's where it kind of went to, was that, hey, I need to, I need to have this content
bizarre,
out there,
though.
because I need to make my money.
Yeah.
But in the case of Mode of Contact, these people, they didn't make money off of this. They didn't make fame off of this.
And they didn't want to come forward.
No.
Half of them didn't even want their faces shown.
And they were living in a third world country. What really got me was that.
Now, did you? I was trying to see if you picked this up.
What?
There's the family. The family that talks about the craft that was above their house.
Yes.
Doing
the doctor.
Yes, the doctor that would not go on camera.
Yes.
Now,
that's exactly what I was about to talk about. Like when I said, here's the thing.
Most people think that they don't realize that these are two separate things, entirely separate. So this second craft that was seen after the fact of the initial crash was doing what the doctor. Now, mind you, this doctor is really respected in Brazil. Right. James confirmed that by knowing who it is, but I mean, blocking it out in the film, you can't see who it is. He shoots them from behind. That's the only way they'd go on camera. They didn't want to talk at all, but they convinced them to tell the story. They show up with the cameras. They say, what are you doing? We're not going on fucking camera. And they had to beg them, like, how much money do you want? They're like, we don't want your money, but we want to tell you the story, but we don't want to go on camera. So again, they had to, they're like struggling to get these people to come forward. These people don't want money. They just don't want to be looked, but they don't want the world to look at them like they're crazy. And I think if we're still living in that world where what he said was, this is 1996 in Brazil. They ordered a pizza. Their pizza got there. He goes outside, pays for the pizza, and on his way, he looks up, and then there's this craft. It's right above the house, and it's oscillating, but it's doing like a very fast grid pattern, like it was searching for something.
It was searching for them.
It was searching for them.
Here's the thing, is that, we have drones these days that vary in size, but they can move and they can do things that are unbelievable. Now, when you're talking about an extraterrestrial race that had technology beyond our understanding, imagine their drones that can do these grid-like shape, grid-like patterns, and do all this at a fraction of the time it takes for one of our craft to do that.
Oh yeah,
looking for these lost beings, because
maybe going in and out. So a lot of people report like seeing UFOs fold in on themselves. a lot of it, I mean, what if it is? What if they occupy the same space as us in a different dimension, on a higher dimension? Who knows? And that's why, like, when we see them, they look like they're doing these erratic, like it's almost like jumping. A lot of people say when they see it, it's like it skips through space and time. Well, what if it is? What if that's how they move, and it's like they're moving through dimensions. It, as a three-dimensional being, we have the ability to perceive one dimension, dimensions, and three dimensions. We can't perceive the fourth, but we know that there's a fourth dimension. What if they are from the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth dimension, and they have the ability to see 1 through 8, when we only have the ability to see 1 through 3? But when they come into our fabric of reality and they allow us to see them, is the only time we get a good look at them. This could be a good hypothesis on why it happens like that. It sounds crazy.
It really can. I mean, when you think about this, right? So you have, we're three-dimensional beings that our eyes essentially see, give the perspective of a two-dimension. Now, granted, we can see three, that, the depth of field, right?
Right.
But our vision almost presents it in like a two-dimensional form, right?
Yes.
So we're seeing it like a flat image. And so if you have a fourth dimensional being show up and they see things in pure, 3 dimensions, I mean, they're going to see things that you cannot see,
that you can't even perceive.
You can't even perceive. So, I think that is, a very likely scenario, because I mean, when you talk about how far these beings would have to travel to get here, what if the reason why they're able to be here so often and so much is because essentially they're not traveling anywhere, they're traveling through dimensions, which is essentially they're not even having to go anywhere. Like I'm going to travel right here,
and that could be a reason they don't like the nuclear weapons, because maybe nuclear weapons don't just affect the space that we occupy. Maybe it has a ripple effect through space and time. I mean, you're literally splitting the atom, and I mean, the science. I mean, it turns. There could be effects that we don't even really we could be, every time that we test a nuclear bomb, we could annihilate another world. We have no idea what we're doing. We're essentially apes with thermonuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Joe Rogan has done a lot of good for the subject, but he's also, I think he's quick to judge. Like when he recently just had James on, he was interjecting a lot, and a lot more than he did with Bob Lazar, which in my opinion, Bob Lazar's story sounds way more far-fetched than anything that came out of Virginia. Bob Lazar, of course you know the story, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yes.
The whole reason that we know about Area 51 is because of Bob Lazar. So there are some things about his story that are like, huh. But there's a lot that also doesn't add up in his story. And Rogan really believes Lazar, but I don't think he really believes Virginia.
I think that when it comes to Bob Lazar, there are things about his story that you cannot you can't deny, such as Area 51. Now, granted, he was at S4.
And specifically S4.
Yeah, he was at S4, right? Element 115, which is now on the periodic table, which it wasn't then. So how would he know about that? Now
he was talking about Element 115 in 1989, and they didn't find a stable version of it. They did this in Russia in 2013, and it's called Moscovium.
Yeah.
And they haven't even they didn't even get the isotopes right yet.
Like it didn't even last very long.
Yeah, there's 13 isotopes for gold. Only one of them is stable. That's the one that you have on your finger if you're married. That's the gold that we have. That's special to us. Is that one stable version of the molecule out of 13. So again, Bob Lazar's talking about element 115 in 1989, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And it's not actually proven to exist literally until how many years later is that? 40 some odd years later, 50 some odd years later.
Mhm.
That you can't deny that. Like you can't deny it. The hand scanner that he talked about as well.
And they literally found it.
They found it, yeah.
Jeremy Corbell found it and he presented to him like, "Hey, is this what you saw?" And he was like, "Holy shit, you found it!"
Yeah.
Now, I've seen people argue that, oh, he probably seen the fucking machine and just said, "Well, no one's ever going to see that again. I'll just pretend I'll just say that that's what I used, and they can never prove me wrong."
Right, but it's the custodian theory.
Exactly, but to me, when he saw that, he's like, "Holy crap!" I mean, it was undeniable at that point. I was like, dude, this is what he saw. This was the machine that he used back then.
Yeah,
and they had it there because he was advanced at that point.
I am a person who does actually believe in Bob Lazar's story. I think they brought him in because they knew they could discredit him.
Oh, easily. It's the same, it's the same theory that you could say about Lee Harvey Oswald, that he was involved with it because
fall guy.
He was easier, to be the fall guy and just blame it on him. And not only that, I mean, I'm going to stop myself because I'm going to go off on a tangent, but there was another, I want to say it was in Florida, where there was a fall guy set up for that, and there was going to be an assassination attempt before
the JFK thing is very wild.
Yeah, it's wild.
It's wild.
Oliver Stone has a great documentary about it.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen that, you guys should probably go check that out. But I'm trying to find.
A lot of people in the UFO world liked the JFK topic as well. I don't, just because, again, like I can only focus on so much.
Well,
and
again, it's like another version.
Could have been assassinated because of the UFO, and that's maybe drawing too much speculation. But there is proof to suggest that he may have been killed but for one of many reasons.
One of many. I mean, they were not happy with the fact that he wasn't going along with what they wanted to do. Now, what I have in front of you guys,
is Lazar's craft.
Yeah, everyone at home who's listening on YouTube podcast, we're looking at a drawing of Bob Lazar that he made of the UFO that he went into working at Area S4. And so he describes, now one can argue, okay, well, he's had plenty of time to recreate this drawing so many times where he can draw it like, at the back of his hand.
Right.
But I mean, his story hasn't changed. And I think that's one reason why Joe Rogan believes him so much, is because his story hasn't changed. You have Element 115, you have Area 51, which nobody knew about until then. There was a lot of things that he has talked about. And again, when you look at the, I think it might've been the Move Fast video, you see the craft turn on its axis,
the gimbal.
just like, yes.
The gimbal, yeah.
Yeah, was it the gimbal video?
They called it the gimbal because of how it rotated on an axis like a gimbal would.
And Bob Lazar says, their propulsion
that they fly
works
very first.
Yeah, that they point their belly at a direction, and that's how it goes. And the craziest thing was when he talked about the technology that he used in order to move, that they have these reactors or these whatever they're called that create their own gravity.
Yeah, and so they're like quantum field generators that emit so they basically distort gravity. So basically the way Bob tells it is, so picture this. So you put a bowling ball on a bed and you put your hand and fist in front of it, and you're able to move the bowling ball, not touching it, but by distorting the area in front of it. So basically, the fabric of space-time is very similar in that way, where it's on a linear plane, and you're basically distorting the gravity in front of you. So you're falling through space and time. So it's actually very clever. It'd be very. The science makes sense when he talks about it.
It does, and the fact that if we're talking about a craft that can create its own gravity, then you're not dealing with inertia. You're not dealing with the G-force that will, like pancake you against your chair when you're moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, however fast that they can go, is because you're creating your own gravity that can slip through the fabric of time. I mean, it just, you can move at your own rate, and you have no. I mean, when you go
You
back
could
to,
essentially power a craft like that with a 5-volt battery.
and that's the thing too. He said he goes, any type of energy at any size will emit uh, some form of heat. This thing doesn't put out any heat at all.
None.
But we're dealing with, as he explains, we're dealing with large amounts of power that they have no idea how these things worked at the time. And so for them to back engineer this thing, I mean, you're talking about like, how do you back engineer something that uses an element that is not available to us as a species?
He makes a very good. So Bob Lazar is one of the best fucking comparisons that I've ever heard, and it's when he says, giving humans these like humans trying to reverse engineer these craft that they tried to get him to reverse engineer or to be able to reverse engineer. It was like sending a nuclear reactor back into the Bronze Age. The first guy would go in, he would take the thing apart, and he would die because of radiation exposure. The second guy would go in, he would go to check on the guy, he would die. Right? They would have no fucking clue what was killing them. No clue, because they have no comprehension of the fact that the radiation that is literally engulfing them, that's what's killing them. It's essentially a caveman playing with a nuclear reactor. That's essentially what we're doing when we're trying to reverse engineer these crafts. But we have got some of it right, and that's where things like fiber optics come from. There's been a lot of speculation about certain technologies, the circuit board, atomic layering. All these technologies came from little pieces of reverse engineering of these craft. So, I mean, again, I'm not here to paint anyone's beliefs, but there are just far too many stories. And then, I mean, if you want to get into abductions, I have a couple minutes. If you want to talk about abductions, abductions aren't really my thing.
Neither with me as well, but I mean, talking about what you just kind of touched on, and when we talk about Bob Lazar, I mean, it would make sense that these craft are able to move the way they do because of the fact that they're creating their own gravity, and that allows them to move at speeds and at angles that our craft
turns,
are nowhere near capable of. And you wonder why. Okay, so why are they shaped like a pill? And when you look at the way that the gravity, it's talking about a heart shape. Now imagine a heart shape. If it was at the nose of one of that pill, it would surround it, so you can just literally go wherever you want. And like this thing doesn't have any windows. This thing doesn't have a cockpit, so it almost makes you wonder if they're able to telepathically connect to these crafts, and that's how they're able to kind of jointly telepathically control these things. I mean, who knows? And the fact that Colonel Fravor saw a bigger one in the water, just like we see right here. This thing was zigzagging back and forth over this thing. And what does he do? So
tries to intercept it like a madman.
He's like, I'm gonna get as close as I can to it. And then as soon as he starts to intercept it, it takes off, and he's like,
"Well, no, so it's a little bit more crazy than that."
Well,
so,
it is.
So first off, Kevin Day of the Princeton, so the battle group again. So they're off the coast of San Diego. They're in the vicinity Now again, their actual location is classified because they're doing safety drills. So this makes it even a little bit more interesting for something that I'll tell you in a little bit, because the location part of it there's an aspect to the story that if their location is secret, how did this craft do what it did eventually? So they Kevin Day, he is in the radar room on the Princeton. The Princeton in the battle group, the Nimitz is the main ship, but the Princeton, that's like the spy ship. So that's where all the spy stuff comes out of. And that's how they monitor. So that's the eye in the sky. They get the Spy 1 radar, which is like a god's eye view. So you hear in one of the videos, in the gimbal video, you hear, look at that. Look on ASA. There's a whole fleet of them. ASA is that god's eye view. So it's basically a view of the whole battlefield, right? They call it the battlefield, but it's the whole perspective. It's the whole area that they're surrounding. So ASA, if I would love to see what was on that page that they were talking about, because many people missed this in the video, but he says there's a whole fleet of them.
Yes.
But they're only getting that one on camera because they're locked in on that one.
Right.
But,
and it's that new radar at the time.
Yes,
I think it was called LiDAR. I think it was called. And they updated their radar capabilities. And then all of a sudden, boom, all these things showed up that they were like, what the hell?
And they were
what
dropping.
Are all these things?
They were dropping from 80 above. So 80,000 feet is the limit on the Spy 1 radar. So we don't know if they were dropping from 100,000 feet, 120,000, but it was at least 80,000 because that's what the Spy 1, that's when it starts to pick it up. So they were going from 80,000 feet to the sea level, and like kind of what you see in this picture, in less than a second.
And this is a recreation, by the way.
Yeah.
This is not an actual image. It's a recreation of what Colonel Fravor saw when he was flying towards the Tic Tac UFO. And the fact that there was the bigger one in the water is the one that really gets me. And when they don't touch on that much, but that goes to show you that, if this was a back engineered military craft, that, it's obviously contacting a bigger version of itself. It's underwater, or it is in fact an extraterrestrial species that has installations under the water, and it's probably running reconnaissance for it. A real quick, Mike Sierra says, what's that laughter? My son is in the room wearing headphones watching his one of his shows, so that's why I told him, you gotta be quiet. He's only not in here, but my wife isn't at home, so that's why he's hanging out with us.
So when Fravor takes his dive, and he says, so he's the commander of the Black Aces. He's essentially Tom Cruise in Top Gun.
Exactly.
When he tells Commander Dietrich, I'm going to get a closer look. She basically thinks to herself, she's like, I'm about to watch him die. Like, I'm about to watch something terrible happen, because the way that this thing was moving, she said it was outpacing us. It was outmatching us. There was nothing we could do. We were just, she said she felt like she was just a witness to something that was about to be terribly, terribly tragic. So when Fravor dives and he goes to get a closer look, he notices that the water is white rapid, like churning, like the caps of when water starts hitting itself, you'll start seeing this white foam, and this, that's where the rapids start to push, and the oxygenation. God, I can't say that word. Oxygenization of the water starts happening. So something was under the surface of the water, and yes, this Tic Tac was
for sure living. You're killing me with that one.
Yeah, this thing's moving around, right? Like literally moving around at just things. It starts to mimic Fravor, so it is showing signs of intelligence. So Fravor starts to do a flight. So he's flying around, right? So he's keeping a lenticular path. This thing starts matching him, but then he gets to a certain point, and this thing just pivots and comes across his nose of his plane. So it did a 90-degree turn and comes up instead of like continuing its flight path. It goes, turns, and comes up over his nose of his plane, and boom, he says it's gone. But then the story doesn't even end there. Then he tells his Wizzo, which is the person in the back seat of the plane, who that's like doing all the radar control and all that. He's like, dude, I'm a little bit creeped out. He's like, so let's go back to the ship and let's regroup. Then they get a call from the Princeton. Dude, you're never gonna believe where that thing is. What do you mean? Dude, it's at your cap point. So this is a predetermined location that they were using during the training mission that they canceled to go see this thing. So because they were originally tasked with a training mission, they were going to do a dogfight, like a training mission, bad guys versus good guys. But they canceled it, and they said, they had real world tasking because Kevin Day had been seeing these things for a couple days. And he was like, dude, we need to go see what these are. They're operating off the coast of the United States. And if we don't go look, we're not doing our jobs. So the admiral agreed. And that's when that we get that sighting and that crazy interaction.
And there's no reason that Colonel Fravor would want to make this up. He has no reason to. He's a decorated pilot, but now he wants to make this up for what? He hasn't made any money off of this. It just doesn't make any sense when you try to spin that narrative. And the fact that you have other pilots that are telling you, yeah, like off the coast of the East Coast, there's been sightings of these they call them the beach balls. It's these squares, these cubes that are surrounded by like a
sphere,
a clear
plasma.
sphere. Yeah, and they're just floating out there. And so you wonder, what the hell are those, and who's controlling those? Well, and we don't know. I mean, it could be our government. It could be another government. It could be extraterrestrial. We don't know. And so I think, to be honest, and we're going to start wrapping things up here, but I really believe that we're dealing with multiple species of aliens that are, or extraterrestrials that are coming and going from our planet. And just like with governments, I think that some of them have more territory and more power than others. And I mean, look at it.
It's a good notion. And maybe, so Dr. Greer says in order to be an advanced civilization, in order to be someone who can traverse the cosmos like they do, they would have to be benevolent. They would have to be peaceful. I think that is so dangerous to assume.
No, I would not even come close to assuming that, because you never know what their intentions are.
You're going to end up like the girl in Independence Day at the top of the building holding the sign. That's who you're going to end
vaporized.
Up like. You're just going to get vaporized one day, like because you're being asinine. To say that at least one of these species that may be visiting, that's rumored to be visiting, is at least indifferent to human beings. Maybe they find us to be a nuisance. Maybe we're in the way, and they just haven't really done anything yet.
But I mean, when you look at the shape of these two crafts that are, granted, this is a recreation, right? But it's based off testimony, right? When you look at the shape of these craft, again, this reminds me of what they saw in Varginha, Brazil. A craft, similar design, maybe a little bit longer than the one that's circled right now, but a similar, a cylinder.
Well, yeah, no. I would say it's exactly because remember, so
it's the same technology.
Picture, it looks like
what I'm getting at.
Yeah, in this picture, it looks like it's this big, but Fravor said this thing was like a 40-foot. Picture a propane tank in someone's backyard. It's like a 40-foot white tanker. Just flying in the air.
Image of it. Hold on. I have one right here.
It's like the size of a small bus, like a school bus. That's that's what they related it to.
This one's pretty cool. I'm not sure how entirely accurate it is, but I think it's pretty close.
Is it the one with the two hooks on the bottom?
I've seen that one. I never saw it with the hooks though. That's why I was kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know where they get that design.
I never heard anything about the hooks, but here's at least an example. 40 feet.
Yeah, see, 40 feet.
Yeah. And so there's a pilot size. So if you're going to have someone and this pilot is 6'4". So imagine if you had a pilot that was what, 4 feet,
Right.
the
Right.
size of those guys. You could fit 3, 4, 5 of them in there with plenty of room. And okay, so one of the things that I did want to bring up that just took me by surprise when I heard it, but Christopher Mellon, when he was on with Joe Rogan, right, he made a comment in passing that to me, it just sounded. He said basically, he said, here's a theory. What if we're dealing with an extraterrestrial species that, sends these craft from millions of light years away, and then upon arriving at its destination at Earth, it can create an artificial being within the craft
Yeah.
and program it
And then
to
start
do.
creating itself, like replicating itself, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like you don't have to put your own species in it. You have a means of replicating your species within the craft and programming them to do their jobs.
Yeah.
And
So it's a highly advanced AI, and I mean, look, we're on the brink of artificial intelligence explosion right now. So this could be the grays. A lot of people talk about the short grays as being very robotic, right? So almost anyone that I've talked to, and I've talked to Kathleen Martin, who is the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, who were the first people ever to say that they were abducted by aliens. They talk about these beings as being very robotic and how they could be a hive mind, but there is definitely another species involved because there are two separate species. There's the smaller ones, and then there's the ones that are taller. And the ones that are taller are clearly running the show.
Right.
But and again, this is all this isn't me saying it. This is all other people. I've never been abducted to my knowledge. I've never seen any of I've seen a UFO, but I've not seen a pilot. So I mean, but a lot of people say the Greys could be a really advanced AI, like just a hive mind, really robotic, just programmed to do their job, and that's why they're indifferent. And that's like when they take people, maybe that's why they don't really show emotion, because they're just doing their job.
They're just doing their job. So imagine you're having an organic artificial intelligence, and that's what we're looking at. And it very well could be that is what they have been since day one. And
and what our ancestors called magic and gods among men, that's what we call aliens and UFOs.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, and this is sort of a sidebar, and that's why, recently, when we talk about like even pop culture, Zack Snyder at Full Circle, he had mentioned, he said, yeah, he goes, or I should say his VFX supervisor, DJ said, one of the stories that we really liked that we ended up not using was that, Zeus and Ares and all those characters, that they were Kryptonian, and that's where it came from. And so a lot of people were like, oh, that's dumb. I don't like that. That takes away from Wonder Woman's heritage. And But for me, I was like, dude, that's a fucking cool idea. Cause it's like, yeah, how would a species with powers all of a sudden be in our world unless they came from a different planet, their ship crashed and they lived here and then, went on from there. I thought that was a brilliant idea. But obviously people were like, oh, they didn't like it because it wasn't true to canon. And I get that. But I thought the idea itself shows you that that's that kind of outside the box thinking.
Did you see the
Marcus
Flash?
Cruz?
Obviously,
Marcus
you saw the Flash.
Ty, why did you become a UFO channel instead? We answered that earlier in the show. So if you go ahead,
is the first question I answered, and to be honest, I don't want to make this about me, but the Snyder stuff really did it that's really what pushed me over the edge, is the division.
Yeah.
The division.
Oh yeah.
I started hating people like what's that idiot? Abdul.
Oh yeah, that guy. Yeah.
No, what is his name?
I don't want to say
Sil. Yeah, Sil. I started like.
Why did you say that name?
we don't talk about that name around here anymore. That's forbidden territory.
I forgot
But
about
yeah,
I forgot how good drops were.
well, but still, I get what you mean. I mean, look, I've had to work through it. In fact, I reached a point where I said, you know what, I don't I don't give a shit about what
Like
I'm covering. And,
I watched
and
The Flash. I liked it.
I
I thought
like the
it could be
movie.
better.
Yeah, and there were things I didn't like about it. I gave it a 6 out of 10 because there were some things I didn't like about it. But overall, I said it was a fun movie. It's got good action. It's a good time. And they did the best that they could. With what they had.
Yeah, and
But
again, and I think people like think this factionalism. We need to stop. It happens in the UFO field, because people ask me. This is another big thing. Well, if if you felt that the movie community was toxic, well, why did you pick UFOs to talk about? Well, it's like, well, I mean, well, I can do it without anyone's oversight, and I don't have anyone, gnawing at me because like people get so you guys get so into this movie business, and it's not like I stopped watching movies or stopped watching the things that I love. I'm still there on opening night. I just don't. It's not passionate. There's no passion in talking about it with people online in this format for me anymore. It just
it's
I started hating. Like you can go back and start seeing where I just it became so boring and repetitive.
mhm.
For
I mean
me, the
that's why.
UFO topic is never boring.
Well, and on top of that, it's also something that you're striving for knowledge. You're striving for to understand more and more about it. Now, and then the thing too, when it comes to, like, pop culture, I do on my channel, I do one show a week because
Again, yeah, and
that's
I don't want to
enough.
sound like I'm like, oh, by the way, I'm better because I left.
No, not at
Like
all.
that's not like
No,
I think what you guys do with the foreigners is great. I think
yeah.
that community is what is so vital about the movie industry and like the movie community. And that's what I loved about it. But that's also what I hated.
Well, the tribalism that exists within that was really annoying, and like I reached a point where I was like, you know what, I don't really give a shit who I talk to. It shouldn't be about, oh, if you talk to this guy or hang out with that guy, I can't be your friend. At this point, I'm like, dude, I don't give a fuck. Like, I have friends who are they're my friends, and that's it. I don't care what you think. You either like my content or you don't. I'm just doing this because it's fun and I enjoy doing it. Um, and so that's why, when I saw that Ty had switched over to total disclosure, my first thought, to be honest, the first thought when I saw it was, I was like, oh, he did it. I was, because I knew that, like, if you didn't know this, I had known that Ty was into this stuff for since the day I met him, and so I was like, oh, he did it. I was like, well, good for him, because,
Yeah.
like, you know what, it's something different from what he was doing, and it's something that he can get passionate and dive into, and it's like, and most of the guys that are involved with pop culture aren't going to follow you in that because they're just like, oh, I don't know anything about that.
They
So
did, dude. They totally like not. There's only like I could probably say a handful, maybe
yeah.
5 or 6 people. I mean, listen, the YouTube but I kept the same YouTube channel because I didn't want to lose all the subscribers and start from zero.
Oh yeah, fuck that.
But I built my SEO, which search engine optimization. I built that around pop culture for 3 years and then I switched it to UFOs. Now the algorithm is like it doesn't like me, but I started a new podcast feed. So the podcast all of a sudden just blew up. I mean, the amount of people that are watching the show on Spotify literally just blows me away. And all of a sudden, I'm getting introduced to people that are high level, like in the government. I'm getting introduced to people on the regular who are in the need to know. I've talked to a few people behind the scenes that will be coming on the show very soon that you've probably seen on other shows. Nothing crazy, nothing new. But for me to be able to talk to them is really special for me because I haven't even been doing this a year yet. And it's like I took what I loved about movies and TV and I brought it to the UFO field. And I was like, I want to show you guys something, because what the movie industry showed me is that this engagement with audience is needed. And maybe we could do that in some form or fashion with the UFO
Right.
community. And I think it's gone really well. And again, we just hit another milestone the other day. It's just milestone after milestone on the audio side, and we have video on Spotify. So, as far as I'm concerned, YouTube can suck a dick. Spotify pays me a lot more.
And that's something that I'm gonna start doing myself. Is start downloading the audio of all my my streams and put them on
Yeah, I
on
highly
Spotify,
recommend it.
because
Highly recommend it.
I have that Spotify for podcasts like you were talking about. I was trying to do it earlier, but like it was having a hard time. I think it's because I use a program to get the audio as opposed to downloading it from the website. So I think that's my problem. So I'm going to start doing that, just to get the channel out there. It's already on YouTube Music podcasts.
Yeah.
It's actually picked up more traction on there too, which has helped. But
yeah, that when they gave that tab, that did, because one of my problems at YouTube is like people can't listen and just like put their phone in their pocket.
Exactly.
Because like then a button gets clicked and you're X'd out, or whatever. Like you can't, unless you have premium, you can't,
unless you have premium. That's the whole thing.
You can't swipe up and like let it play like you can on Spotify. So what I love about Spotify, and when they came to me before they rolled, because I got video right before, probably 3 months before they rolled it out like wide, because I was part of like a beta test. So they wanted to see if it was going to be feasible first before they rolled it out to everybody. So I signed up to be part of like the program, and I had to do like 3 interviews with them, which kind of sucked because they were like 90 minutes long.
Oh,
but
wow.
Yeah, it was brutal. But we got access to it a little bit early, and I think it really helped, because at that time I was starting the new podcast and trying to recreate a name for myself with, I had made so many friends, so many connections, like I was getting to interview some really cool people in the pop culture field, and getting to those points, reaching higher. And then I just tore it down and started new. And now I'm back to the point where I'm trying to build something again. But I think that's what sparks the creative side of me. And I think that's what I'm passionate about, is I like to ask myself these questions, to ask I urge your audience and you to ask yourself these questions, because yes, where it's fun to be wrapped up in a universe of movies like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the DCE. Oh, I'm sorry, James Gunn's DCU. It's fun to get lost in that stuff for a little while, but come back to reality, because we need you here. Something's going on. And I think we owe it to ourselves to ask the question, are we alone in the universe? What happens after we die? I think these are healthy things to talk about. And by answering one, we may be able to solve the other, or vice versa. So I think we're on the edge. The world is on the edge. We're right on the edge of a global change. And if you want to be a part of it, then reach out to your local congressman. Tell them you want more transparency. Fight for more transparency. Get up there. Show that you care about your place in the universe, because this is one of the only bipartisan topics that you'll ever see, and it is a topic that touches every single person on this planet. Because if we're not alone in the universe, and that's being covered up from us, you're hindering the advancement of human civilization. That is a crime against humanity, and we are owed those answers. So again, it may not be the biggest deal to you, but I think that you should, as a person, ask yourself what your place in the universe is. What makes you so special? Why can you even ponder these questions? What is the meaning of it all? and that's what I get to do for fun now. So this has been really fun, man. I would love to do this again. It's almost midnight, so I gotta wrap up. But
my mic's muted. Sorry about that. No, I agree. We've been going for 2 hours now, and like you said, it's about midnight your time, so we're gonna wrap things up. But no, this has been fun. Let's do it again, definitely. And I'll hit you up on the side about that after the show. But I want to thank you.
And I'll send you. I couldn't do it on such a short fly, but I'll send you personally. So I took a 5-minute clip from the interview with Marco, so I might not have gotten to show it to everybody, but I'll send it to you and you can take a listen.
Oh, definitely.
Because what he says, and it's pretty mind blowing.
Well, like I said, Ty, I want to thank you for coming on here and talking to us.
Yeah.
If you haven't done so yet, check out Total Disclosure Podcast. It's on Spotify.
And you can visit totaldisclosure.org,
and
you can go. It'll direct you to whatever your platform or choice is. Been putting out some articles there as well. Ever since I left the GWW would not post a UFO article. They told me
that's just not who they are. They're like, yeah.
They're like, no, we're not posting any more of these. So I was like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
So
and then you also have a YouTube channel as well.
Yeah.
And really, I know most of your stuff is on Spotify and is podcast form, but you still have the channel. I mean, doing shorts, I think, is the best way to gain traction. That's usually what I do. Is use shorts of my videos and just put them in segments so that it just leads to more interaction. But guys, check out Total Disclosure. And one thing I've been wanting to tell you was that I loved how the bottom of the UFO is the logo from Pop Culture Corner. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, there it is. It's right there. It's been there the whole time.
Yeah, it was hidden.
It was there the whole time, It was belly up, you know what I mean? So I just thought that was
I'm actually really surprised you noticed that.
I did almost immediately. I was like, oh my God, there it is.
Yeah. It's like I paid a homage to what started it all.
Right.
Right. Because I wouldn't be where I'm at now without Pop Culture Corner. It's as Superman once said, it's dead, bury it. But I'll never forget it. It was a special time.
Right. All right.
And I made some great friends.
Well, Ty, that's going to do it for the show. Everybody who tuned in today, thank you so much for watching. Follow the channel on YouTube podcasts. I'll soon have this up on Spotify as well. The podcast should be up on YouTube podcasts if you're listening at home. And if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the channel. Support the channel by joining the Patreon or becoming a member. Hit that bell notification button so you're always notified of any new content the channel puts out. And Ty, I want to say thank you again for coming on here and having this great conversation with me and with everyone watching. What is this? Great show. Thank you, Return to Living. Return to Living is a good fan of the show. But that's gonna do it. So guys, I will see you
probably
again.
Wasn't their normal cup of tea and what they usually expect to get, but a healthy dose of something new is always good for the soul. So no, thank you man, and I'd be happy to come on and talk about it anytime you want.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
We'll do it again. Other than that, we'll see you guys next time. You'll see me again live again probably tomorrow night doing another gaming stream. I won't be live this weekend or this week on Thursday on the 4 Nerds. In fact, none of us will because we're all gonna be out of town. But we'll be back the following week, and then you'll see me again Monday. Wait, no, you won't see me on Monday because I'll be out of town again on a family vacation. But in a couple of weeks, I'll be back for the Nickatina show. Until then, I'll be doing some gaming streams throughout the week and playing some DC Universe Online with Zebrafet and Mad Matt Vids. Tyler, thank you so much for coming on here, and everyone who watched.
In a while.
I know, right? All right, guys, we'll see you guys next time. Peace.